You're just applauding because we start on time, right? Yay! Okay. Well, welcome. Great to see you all here, and it's been a pleasure getting to know a lot of you. We are Disnovation. Here is Maria Rostkowska, Nicolas Maigret, Baruch Gottlieb. And we're here to present some of our work over the last 5 years. We've gotten to know some of you, but a lot of you we haven't had the chance to talk with. But the whole intention of this event is to further the discussions, generate some interesting exchanges, not only between us and you, but between you and other people here, everybody, in maybe surprising new ways. Let's see. So we're not lowering the lights completely, so you can still take notes and prepare your questions. And yeah, so I'm here to just introduce how the evening is going to go too. First, we're going to start off presenting a collaboration. As you know, we're a art, science, and tech collective. We work intensively with engineers, scientists, and technicians to help see how art can synthesize some of the more complexities of the conditions that we're confronting today. And yeah, we're going to start off with a first collaboration with the anthropologist Nicolas Nova. Oh yeah, you can see us here. This is us. We often have many collaborators depending on the project that we're working on. And we also work with many different institutions. So if you're interested, please reach out. And yes, we are going to start with our first project, which Maria will introduce. It's a collaboration with the anthropologist Nicolas Nova, a bestiary of the Anthropocene. Take it away, Maria. Thanks.
Thank you. So, like Baruch presented already, we are Disnovation. Since 8 years, we are working on rhetorics of technological innovation, post-growth, and underreported stories on changes in society related to technology. In 2015, we edited a pirate book on sharing, distributing, and experiencing cultural contents outside of the boundaries of local economies, politics, and laws. And we are especially interested in developing different forms of publications which are between theory, research, and art and exhibition. So for the bestiary, the main idea was that nature and technological hybrids are not anomalies anymore or exceptions. They are normalized, so this situation needs its own glossary, a kind of updated version of Atlas of Species. So we wanted to find ways to share something that is already present and demands to exist, and express this feeling that this entanglement is inseparable already. So we started a collaboration with Nicolas Nova and prepared a list of 60 examples of these nature-technology hybrids. And like in the Middle Ages bestiaries, this is a non-exhaustive list. We try to avoid a judgment or moralistic perspective. We try to keep a journalistic style in descriptions of each specimen. And the structure is inspired by a taxonomy of Carl von Linne, minerals, animals, plants, and miscellaneous, which are mushrooms, clouds, and viruses. For the content, we really wanted it to spread on the forum. So our main inspirations were soft pocket field guides, biodiversity literature, and we really wanted to make the impression that you could take the book with you during your field research, so you could potentially help to recognize, it could help you to recognize the specimens in their natural habitat. The book contains 60 handmade illustrations, which are hybrids as well, between organic and artificial. Photos of existing specimens are redesigned, adding handmade raster with points, vectorized with such settings that the aspect looks like a hybrid between drawing and a computer-made illustration. These are some examples. So these are specimens which really exist. This is not like each of them is existing in the real world. This is not fiction. This is not art. These are really ready-mades that we just collected in this book. The second part of the book is called Observations. It's less factual and more critical. It's a reflexive part with 10 contributions from authors like Benjamin Bratton, Anat Singh, Geoffrey Boker, Alliance Green, Alexandre Monin, the Center for Genomic Gastronomy, which is an art collective, and on aspects like classification, artificiality, unintentional design of the Anthropocene, and here, like, for example, Negative Commons. In this part, the illustrations are less factual and much more critical or symbolic. So, for example, for the contribution by Geoffrey Boker on Gestalt switch, which is a changing of perspective, like a paradigm or way of looking at things, this part contains illustrations from 18th century collection, The Reversed World, which represents a world where the roles of animals and humans were reversed. So also from the beginning, the structure of the book was imagined like an exhibition. So the illustrations are big. There are big illustrations and short text like labels. And our first show took place in Geneva in Théâtre de l'Orangerie in the glass house. We were working with gardeners, local gardeners on a hybrid space design combining artificial glass and living plants. Artificial grass and living plants. And here are some pictures from the show in Cité Internationale in Paris from last year. And this time the exhibition was designed mostly to be seen from outside. And it's like a dioramas in the Museum of National History. So recently, also in addition to illustration, we add the real specimens, like real objects that we show in the glass cases, like here in Switzerland, for example, in Langenthal. So after this short introduction, I will just take a few minutes to show the real specimen. I mean, so you have a better idea what this book is about and what is actually this hybrids nature technology, which is quite obvious, I think, for everyone. So the first specimen is Fordite, which is a byproduct by the car industry, made out of paint deposits from old car painting racks, on which cars were hand spray painted, and it formed kind of build-up of layers of this enamel paint, and the result remains an agate stone. So this paint this kind of mineral can be polished and transformed into jewelry, for example.
Getting the nice hard material here. Check out those layers. It's actually extremely hard. Nice, big, thick material. Way thicker than I've ever seen before. So, yeah, we took it off of here, coming down, and Dan's over here working on a little stalactite, working his chisel around.
So it can be seen also as ecology of art.
He's a man of few words, but he has a plan. Just watch, here it comes.
Or an example of
there you go.
The process of transforming the
Wait at Dan, it looks like your kneecap.
Useless materials.
Could be my kneecap.
Another mineral is plastiglomerate. Mineral in, this kind of mineral. It's a kind of rock made of melted plastics, marine debris, basalt, and wood combined into a single substance by bonfires. It was first discovered on Hawaiian beaches. It's a visible manifestation of a phenomenon that exists at a much more general level almost everywhere on the planet, where when the integration of microplastics particles in our environment and also integration in the food we eat, in the water we drink, and also in our bodies. Decapitated mountains are a mining technique that consists on extracting coal at the summit of a mountain. Coal companies start by raising the mountainside, ripping the trees from the ground, clearing the vegetation with huge tractors, and burning everything at the end. So this is obviously extremely dangerous.
500 mountains have already disappeared, along with the habitats for hundreds of species. And lives are impacted too. When a mining company carves off a mountaintop, it has to put that earth somewhere. And so, it dumps it into nearby valleys. 3,200 local streams have been destroyed, and entire communities have been forced to relocate when the mining companies buy up the land.
Artificial reefs are man-made underwater structures built to revive components of sea ecosystems. So they mimic natural habitats, such as coral reefs, and their main purpose is to improve geodiversity and possibly to create little pockets of biodiversity. And sometimes also this technique is used as a way of disposing of waste without paying the required fees or even getting some recognition as an eco-responsible business for doing this, like here with New York City Metro.
Cape May, New Jersey, to form an artificial reef environmental officials hope will someday be packed with fish. For the men who do this dangerous salvage work miles offshore, the work isn't easy.
You can feel the machine when the barge is moving around. You can feel the machine lean over a little. So it gets a little scary at times. Yeah.
Today's work added another 30 cars to a reef that will ultimately be the underwater home of more than 600 MTA retirees.
So in the mineral kingdom, there is rock-shaped speakers meant to blend when it's placed in the backyard and to be, for example, used during a barbecue in the garden. So it's much less political one. So it's designed just to deliver sound while staying camouflaged in the garden, and generally it features internal wire connections to eliminate corrosion caused by rain, and most of them operate using Bluetooth, and some are also solar powered in order to charge one's smartphone with USB during playing music in the backyard.
Do is decide on where you want to position the speaker. You then want to plan out cable run, placing the speaker and cable on the ground first to ensure all the cables reach where you want the speakers to live. You get a 7-meter power cable.
And the last mineral is nuclear craters, which are human-made ground depression resulting from the detonation. And there are sort of effects of nuclear testing visible on the cosmic scale. So the most cratered landscape on Earth is Nevada desert, called Yucca Flat. And with remains of decades of nuclear tests conducted by the United States since Cold War, and also they are symbols of humans becoming the geological agents symptomatic for the Anthropocene epoch. And for animals, we have the first one is trapped hermit crabs, which have this kind of hermit crabs have curved abdomens that are protected from predators by empty seashell carried by the animal, into which its whole body can retract. And since they are not used to plastic, they can confuse the debris, like cups, straws, boxes washed up on the beaches, with seashells and crawl into it, causing them frequently to get stuck and sometimes starve to death. Drone-catching eagles, it's because of the fear of criminal invasion and terrorist attacks from Iran drones. Dutch police and military forces have taught eagles to spot the Iran drones and perform mid-air takedowns. Noticing that the birds were doing it spontaneously in their natural habitat, they raised them from chicks and trained them to bring the machine to the ground intact. So rather than ripping them apart in the air, which reduces the chance of hurting people below and hurting eagles as well. And some problems appeared. Eagles could get easily blessed, and also they easily get distracted, so it's not 100% reliable. And the whole project was abandoned finally. Animal decoy is the word itself derives from the Dutch decoy, which means the cage, and dates from the 17th centuries. It means life-size models of birds placing in the hunting areas, prompting wild birds to land nearby in order to hunt them. So it could also work in the otherwise, to dissuade birds from feasting on seeds and growing crops, and to chase them away by using the decoys of wolves or foxes, or sometimes it can be applied...
Portable, comes in pieces, and we just put it together. It's very mobile, we can move it to different areas.
We offer cash rewards for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of poachers.
You know, with the old full mount taxidermy, you know, it was pretty much stuck in this position. Now, you can actually, as they sit there, oh, that's not real, you know, have our friend look away, and then when they make a movement, you just come back to them. And usually that's enough to sell them.
This one, most of you must know. This is Big Dog, a military robot produced in 2005 by Boston Dynamics. It was designed as a robotic pack mule to accompany soldiers in terrain too rough for conventional vehicles. It's able to move across surfaces that would defeat wheels, and the project was discontinued in 2015. Nonetheless, each generation of Big Dog robots was depicted in videos which quickly became viral, showing them how it recovers its balance after being kicked by observers. In the kingdom of plants, there is square watermelon, which is simply a regular watermelon grown inside the transparent glass box, so it takes a square shape. It was invented by a Japanese horticulturist and graphic designer named Tomoyuki Ono in 1978, and the same technique may apply to melons, zucchini, tomatoes, cucumbers, and pumpkins.
Farmers from Shikoku Island are very proud of these plants. You won't see anything like this anywhere else in Japan. In matter of taste, there can be no disputes here. Nobody cares what's inside of it. The most important is geometric accuracy. Shape is much more important than contents. In order to turn a round-shaped watermelon into a cube, it has to be put inside of this kind of metal form. All you need is waiting until it fills it completely. This one is almost done. In 3 or 4 days, it will be ready to be cut off.
And antenna tree is an infrastructure camouflaging technique designed in order to make telecom infrastructure less visible and offensive to people living around them. So it was first proposed by South African engineers in the mid-90s, a company called Vodacom. And this tactic also is employed for oil rigs on islands, and recently for 5G antennas in Paris, for example, when they are sometimes hidden inside the fake chimneys.
So when AT&T proposes a new communication site in a neighborhood, one of the first things we do is we meet with the city and we talk about what their requirements are. We also meet with the neighborhoods and talk about design elements that they may want to see in a communication site.
And there is pyrocumulonimbus clouds. These are clouds that forms above a source of heat, such as wildfire, volcanic eruption, or blast. And they can cause some surprising side effects, like, for example, in California, there are wildfires cause so-called smoke effect when the wine yards absorb smoke and they can change the taste of wine. So it's called smoke change. The wine can taste and smell like campfire, which chemical and also so you you can find much more examples of these specimens in the book, which is sold out at the moment, but it'll be available in 1 month with Set Margins Publishing House. So if you have any question, you can discuss afterwards. And I think I will let Nicolas and Baruch present the rest of our research.
Great. Okay, so I will get back to the last process of our collaborative research for the last 5 years. So basically, we started about 12 years ago working together, and at the time we were mostly concerned by let's say the influence of technosolutionism and the way that this kind of mindset and this kind of ways of approaching everything as an issue demanding a solution sort of shaped a by default ideology, and we wanted to be critical about that. So we started developing projects around those lines for years, and 5 years ago we decided to kind of narrow down a little bit the research track. And also climatic and environmental concerns became more important. So we decided to sort of really narrow down to look more specifically at the connection between economic growth and ecological crisis. So we started to use that as a research question and to go and meet academics, theoreticians, activists, and so on. And we interviewed people in many places, many labs, many universities, to try to basically, get a better understanding of the historical friction between economic growth and ecological crisis, but also the contemporary issues and how it can bring light to our current condition, how it can help us grasp our current condition and all the issues that we are facing at the moment. So basically the process of interview most of the time happened in labs, in cafes, in different places, but sometimes we also staged those interviews. The process usually is that we take quite some time meeting with the scientists and getting to know what are the concepts, what are the notions, what are the models that they are using daily in their activity. The key principle, the key lenses, perspectives that they are using in their own practices. And then we came back to them and tried to interview them about those specific lenses or those specific tools to think with. So I will show you some examples of the raw material of those interviews. It will be pretty quick, and then we will unfold on how we transform those material into art experiences. So we'll start with Valerie Olsen.
Lacking energy, lacking resources is the baseline situation that has to be addressed in any kind of aerospace situation, any kind of aerospace building project or imagining interplanetary flight or the survival of people elsewhere. One of the principles that organizes it is efficiency and a capacity to deal with and use the smallest amount of resources possible in the most efficient way. So what we have to ask ourselves in terms of history is why those technologies were considered the most advanced and the most symbolically advanced way to interact with an environment, to recycle, to conserve, to deal with lack of resources, to efficiently use energy in the most effective way, why that didn't translate on Earth to a rapid sort of restructuring of energy systems on Earth. And that's a very interesting paradox in the history of aerospace. I think they provide examples. They provide very, very effective and evidence-based examples of the need to conserve and the need to think systemically about contamination, energy, water, food, to sort of build models of systems that are not separate, that are connected together. The human body and the spacecraft are one systemic unit. We're having a 50-year anniversary of the moon landing in the US this year, in which the technologies used to achieve that are still not largely available and have still not transformed the energy systems in the US, and that's an interesting paradox to look at.
So, and just to show you a little bit of the spectrum of the people and categories and departments and specialties that we interviewed, here is an interview with Rose O'Leary, which is specialized in indigenous wisdom and culture and knowledge. And I will just play one short clip from her.
So the seventh generation principle is just that anytime that someone makes a decision, they should think about its impact 7 generations into the future, and make that decision mindfully and with care and responsibility for the health and welfare of the 7 generations into the future. The 7th generation principle also can be applied more broadly and often is. For instance, as a Washaji or Osage person, as a child, I was taught that whenever you are harvesting plants or animals, but particularly plants, you should always leave 7 plants for every one that you pick. And that's to make sure that the plants also have regeneration capacities for their 7 generations into the future. So in that way, we're not just thinking about the human 7 generations into the future, we're also thinking about all of life on this earth and its 7 generations into the future, in recognition that we need that balance in order for all of us to survive.
Right, and so we collected about 100 of those notions and concepts and principles and models, and we started to share them and present them in exhibitions, in meetings, in lectures, and at some point we got a little bit frustrated by the fact that the pure theoretical level of those notions are very hard to grasp and to make sense of. It's very hard to appropriate and experience what are the limits, the frictions, the paradoxes between those different notions and so on. And that's where we started to collaborate with a game designer to think about a way we could actually put those notions at work. We could help people to embrace those notions in their complexity, in their contradictions and in their tensions. So we started to design quite a simple methodology, so that just an excuse basically, so that people can sit together for an hour or two and are sort of taken to a process of digging into the nuances around those notions, around their implications in real life, around their potential of appropriation and of activation in the public, in the social sphere. So it takes the shape of a card game, a board, sort of questionnaire-based game that you play in group. And that's something that we circulate through exhibitions, workshops, and situations like the kiosk we have here. So that's something which is open source, and you can basically print it yourself and use it if you like to, in your own teaching and so on. And basically some of the notions that we believed were the most complex, the most, let's say, dense or deep, we started to develop actual installations, actual experiments to basically bring complex theoretical or abstract notions, issues, into the realm of something that can be experienced, something that can be, we call it eloquent objects. Objects or laboratory experiments that can replace a lot of talking, can replace a lot of abstract thinking. And I will show you one of those examples. So here, after interviewing a lot of people, we realized that one of the key issues, the key interrogation was the way in which we fail to understand the notion of value, the way that basically neoclassical economic logic and the monetary economic way of thinking render us somehow unable to think about values in other ways, in more radical, in more profound ways. And we wanted to sort of make an illustration and sort of crystallize how we can rethink value radically differently through an experiment. So here we have 1 square meter of wheat, which is cultivated, let's say, in a black box. So in a way, it's fully separated from the ecosystems. And when you do that, the first thing that you experience is that you have to bring around all the artificial inputs that are required to make this simple square meter of plants survive. Just the bare minimum so that it can survive. So you end up with an artificial sun, artificial light, artificial wind system, artificial irrigation system. In the next version, we even had the full weight of the water that is required for the full growth cycle of the wheat, 3 months. Then you have also artificial nutrients, artificial soil, and so on and so on. The second thing you can start to do is you can play the game of economics. You can play with the rules and the aberration of economics, and you can start to quantify what it will cost to grow something as simple as a square meter of plants, here wheat, until the harvest time, 3 months, if we had no ecosystems, or if our ecosystems were highly damaged. And when you do that, you end up with a kilogram of wheat that will cost not anymore 30 cents per kilogram, but 1,000 times more, around 300 euros per kilogram. And here, don't get us wrong, like we are not trying to prove that it's an exact number, that it's a precise number. We are not looking for proving the exact value of the wheat. But it's just about bringing the focus on an order of magnitude, like to bring a sense of scale of what separates our daily understanding of value, here the value of food, from the immense value flows and energy flows coming from wealthy or healthy ecosystems to everything we depend.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that we chose wheat, if you're asking, a lot of the visions, what we started actually, Disnovation, the question about our name, Disnovation, is we were inquiring about this techno-solutionism. And we emerged at that time when techno-solutionism was really big, and we wanted to ask some questions about whether, to what degree technological fixes are really what we need, or there are other fixes that we need, or some combination. Here, you often see when we have visions of a new future, a new hydroponic future, where there's lots of plants being grown in greenhouses, or we're living on the moon, or we're living on Mars or somewhere. But you often see that they're like tomatoes or lettuce or some kind of green vegetable which has a lot of water content. And that does not that's not food that we can actually survive on, because we actually need a certain amount of calories every day to survive. And so we chose a food here, wheat, which is a staple food, a basic food for Europeans, which have been used since history, to feed ourselves and to get enough calories every day so that we can philosophize or invent or do science and do technology. And so we realized that actually to grow wheat takes a lot more energy, because we need energy. The energy that we use in our own bodies is a processed version of the energy that goes into growing the plant. So we have to acknowledge that actually it's ridiculously expensive to try to grow a basic foodstuff like wheat in an artificial circumstance.
Yeah, so we can show you a short statement video. Each of those projects that we will show from now on have these kind of statement videos that are exhibited also next to the projects. And they sort of try to grasp the core of the issues we are dealing with. It's just an example.
The life support system experiment consists of 1 square meter of wheat cultivated artificially in a closed environment. All inputs, such as water, light, heat, and nutrients, are measured, monitored, and displayed for the public. This 1 square meter unit is capable of furnishing 1 day's worth of necessary caloric nutrition for 1 human adult every 4 months. To feed a single human adult would require approximately 100 such units running continuously. This procedure makes palpable the orders of magnitude of material and energy flows that are required to reproduce human nutritional requirements in closed or artificial environments, in contrast to outdoor agriculture on arable land. By attempting to grow a staple food such as wheat, which has historically provided the greatest proportion of necessary caloric intake for humans in Europe, this indoor farm experiment is a counterexample which points to the vastness of the ecosystem contributions involved in conventional agriculture.
So actually, the calories that we eat every day, they all come from the sun, and we're going to come back to the sun very often in our presentation today. It's our only source of new energy on Earth, and we can't eat the sun directly, unfortunately. But so we have to access the sun that's been metabolized through photosynthesis, through plants and through animals that eat the plants. And it's just a kind of it's not a trick, or it's not a magic something that happened. The fact that we evolved and emerged on this planet with the plants that do provide us with the caloric value we need to survive is something called symbiogenesis. It's a theory that is described by Lynn Margulis. And you know, when we start to endanger the biosphere, we put in danger also this relationship between us and this environment, which naturally, together with us, emerged over millions of years to support us.
Yeah, so another of the notions that we got really sort of provoked by was the notion of ancient sunlight. The idea that fossil fuel is actually an accumulation of ancient sunlight that has been sort of condensed over millions of years. And by looking at those ideas, we ran into this concept by Buckminster Fuller of energy slave. So basically, Buckminster Fuller in the 40s was thinking about how to translate the radical new condition of his contemporary citizens. The fact that the condition, the lifestyle of his contemporary citizens had nothing to do anymore with their ability to perform work, to actually work with their own body force. But the most part of their livelihood, of their quality of life, was the result of fossil energy. And he came with this notion of energy slave as a unit that can translate all the energy that a citizen needs to heat a house, to fuel a car, to produce goods and clothing and furniture into an equivalent of human body labor capacity. And at his time already, he identified that a contemporary citizen to him would need between 50 and 100 energy slaves to have the same quality of life. And nowadays, if you wanted to do this kind of calculation again, you would end up with something closer to 400 to 500 in Europe, in Central Europe here. So those are the basic calculations that we used. And we will show you a quick excerpt of this 3D video statement that sort of frame what we are after with this project. So basically, we developed units, physical units made of bitumen that are made to translate physically duration of human physical labor into the extremely abstract energy density of fossil fuel. So it's an order of magnitude that is very hard to grasp, and we wanted to sort of translate that in something physical. So we just show you this short clip and show you the exhibition modules.
Buckminster Fuller refers to the fuel that powers machines in the concept energy slave, an equivalent measure of human work. The unit, one energy slave, represents the physical labor capacity of one human adult in good health. The energy requirements of any lifestyle can be converted into their equivalent in energy slaves, the number of human laborers who would otherwise be required to generate the same amount of energy consumed in that lifestyle. In 2013, it was estimated that the average European uses the equivalent of 400 to 500 energy slaves working 24 hours a day. Energy slave tokens are human labor to fossil fuel conversion units. They consist of a series of weights made of petroleum. Each token is the volume of petroleum energy equivalent to a duration of human labor. 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 1 life. Translated to human scale, these standard units manifest the multiple orders of magnitude that separate the labor energy potentially exerted by our human bodies from the energy exploited from fossil fuels feeding the technosphere. These tokens render tangible the orders of magnitude we will need to confront in order to address the energy transition imperative.
It looks very big, but it's only 80 centimeters high, the whole life token. We have an installation view. So you can see how it's presented in the installation, so people can see. It's actually amazing how condensed fossil fuels are as an energy source.
So the bigger one that you have in front of your eyes here is 1 year. It's about 30 liter, which means half of your car tank. And it's 1 year of labor, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, just based on the French system of work regulations. All right, so we'll move on. Yeah, 35 hours a week, yeah. All right. You want to start this one?
Okay, yeah, sure. So this is another project where we're looking at datafication, at rendering of the economy, how we understand our circumstances. You know, we live. One of the things that we're encountering, I think we're all encountering here, is that even though we have a lot of good insights of how we could do things better, sometimes the circumstances don't allow us to actually develop solutions or better ways of working because they don't serve the profit model. There is a kind of growth imperative in our culture, which revolves around this figure called GDP, right? And GDP is, I'm sure a lot of you, understand that GDP is only just one way of understanding what the productivity of a nation may be, and it's not a very good one. And even the person who, what was his name? The person who invented GDP or came up with the formula did not warned everybody not to use it as a good indication of productivity. But still, it's being used, and it's being used instrumentally to prioritize certain things, certain activities, certain productivity, which creates profits. So here we wanted to show. It's been shown, like in a lot of recent data, that GDP is strongly correlated to fossil fuel use. And the more fossil fuel we use, the stronger the curve goes upwards. And so there's a way to show that the GDP comes at a cost. And we took, so usually, like when when you take an airplane, you have the option to offset your carbon footprint. And this calculation is derived from scientific studies, including the IPCC studies, which are very much oriented to what the consumer or businesses are willing to pay to offset the costs or the damages that emitting a ton of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere will cause. But that's only one calculation, and a calculation which is constrained to, again, what the businesses are willing to pay. We were looking at a more radical calculation. So we found a study by Archer et al. Called The Ultimate Cost of Carbon, which takes a much longer view of climate impacts on ocean acidification, biodiversity depletion, of carbon dioxide emissions, and attributes a much higher number here. As you can see, he has a range of calculations. I don't know if you can see that, but it says here $2,700 to $200,000 per ton of carbon dioxide. I mean, the IPCC doesn't even go up to $1,000 per ton. If we start to take these much more radical ascertainments of the damages that are created by fossil fuel consumption, we start to see that so what you see here is the GDP curve going up, and underneath is carbon emissions, carbon dioxide emissions. And if we just calculate the dollar value per ton of carbon emissions, you can see that the shadow overshadows the growth, right?
Okay, and so we started to work with this team of researchers, and basically what they did is quite a materialist way to assess what will be the damages that we already know will unfold in the future. So they took quite basic things like sea level rise, agricultural efficiency decrease, just those kind of really kind of certain scientific assumptions. And they tried to associate the dollar value of those damages on the long term, considering that those are the, let's say, maybe better ways to estimate what are the costs of each newton of carbon that we emit into the atmosphere. So I will not wait longer and show you one of the short interviews that we had with David Archer, where he defines his methodology for that specific research.
The social cost of carbon is intended to capture how much future damages from climate change matter to us financially today. The costs in the deep future get discounted in the social cost of carbon, reflecting that we don't really care about the deep future so much. But the impacts of CO2 release on the climate will last much, much, much longer than we will live. And so the social cost of carbon, by reflecting our personal preferences, ends up throwing away most, like 99.9% or more of the damages in the deep future because we don't care about them so much. So the ultimate cost of carbon, we designed this to try to eliminate this discounting so that it would add up all the future costs and put them all in units of present day, dollars. Kind of like a measure of the long-term climate impacts converted into units of dollars for us today. In the ultimate cost of carbon, we tried to isolate just the climate impacts as if they were being felt by us today as if we were people that were going to live forever. We tried to treat humanity the way biologists would treat a biological population, that there would be a carrying capacity of the planet which will be compromised in the future by sea level rise and by temperature changes that sort of move us outside of the agricultural best climate. So the paper is intended to translate the very difficult to conceptualize longevity of the climate impacts into units that mean something to us, dollars.
You agree? So based on those models, we took the lowest estimate actually of this range. So the lowest estimate being $2,700, and we started to map and to confront all the GDP that we pretend to be producing since the early days of the Industrial Revolution. So here is 1850, and here is today. And we started to map on the top all the GDP that we pretend to have been producing and that we claim and we appreciate to show off. And on the other side, the part that is most often unrepresented, or that we don't really have ways to translate or to identify. And we gave, basically we just, as Baruch said, translated the historical CO2 emissions with the lowest estimate of the Archer model. And we don't pretend that it's perfect, that it's exact, that it's the true shape of the damages projected into the future, but at least maybe it gives us a sense of the magnitude. You know, like daily we talk about climate change, about environmental damages, but those are things that are pretty hard to grasp and even pretty hard to sense the scale of what we're talking about. So we really wanted to find ways, indirect ways, to give a sense of scale to those issues. Once more, I will show you a very short excerpt of this statement video that we designed for the project.
The Shadow Growth Project brings the flat curve of GDP growth into the third dimension, revealing neglected shadows where such things as greenhouse CO2 emissions from fossil fuel consumed to power industrial production are obscured and neglected. A rising curve based on GDP data, rather than signaling a better life for all, signals the abstraction of wealth from the earth, neglecting the waste and warming which is left behind. With a critical light, this artistic provocation reproduces the shadows normally hidden behind conventionally flat economic representations like GDP. Surprisingly, once these social costs are projected into the model, we can see that the triumphant story of growth is largely counterbalanced by the shadow of damages it has incurred, and that addressing these harms will likely also consummately curtail economic growth.
So we decided to show those curves in every new country where we have the opportunity to exhibit that. Where here it's in the Netherlands, so we picked the historical growth curve from the Netherlands, and we manifested that physically with just pipes, you know, like random pipes from the hardware shop. But so that it really looks like a 3D model, the type of model you will see on the news in the evening, you know. The only difference is that we started to project the missing dimension, the dimension that usually is not represented, that is maybe even hidden by the model. You know, like chatting with Baruch, we started to identify the idea that most of the scientific model actually, they pretend to reveal something, and maybe they do that properly, and maybe they're good at doing it. But at the same time, by the act of revealing something by projecting a light, casting a light on the topic, on a complex object. They also create a shadow, or multiple shadows. There are multiple shadows of what is not accounted for, what is not represented, what is not included in the model. And here, there is obvious shadows, multiple shadows. So we just looked at one of those shadows, which is CO2. But you could redo this project 100 times with the multiple shadows of GDP. But in a more like philosophical way, every scientific models have those shadows implicitly. They are intrinsic to the models.
Yeah, it's a little bit like what happens when you reduce the world to data, right? We all work with data, and data is always an incredible simplification of the complexity of the world. And this demonstration just shows that when we try to bring data back into the dimensionality, the fluid time-space continuum that we live in, actually it produces a shadow. So that's the sculptural provocation that we do here. And yeah, I think that's good.
All
so
right.
we're gonna blast through a few recent projects to show you some of our research in progress right now, and so you get a little sense of what we are working towards, and then we really want to talk with you and open things up so we can have some discussions.
Yeah, so one of the topics we kept coming back to regarding energy and matter, because as you started to understand, we try to think about those issues of sustainability, of the footprint of our lifestyle, of our consumption, of our just human condition in a way, through a very materialist approach. And when you do that, at some point you have to think through circulation of matter and energy in the biosphere, and the complexity of those flows of circulation, historically, geographically, and so on. And in a way, at some point, you have to go back to sort of basic Earth system sciences, where if you want to embrace what sustainability could mean and what renewable could mean from an Earth system science perspective, the only thing which is renewed on a very long time frame is the energy from the sun. That's the only new energy input reaching the Earth system. And it's a pretty much continuous input over time. And some economists and some ecological economists started to, confront themselves with how we could define and describe our condition, our relation to the world, our relation to the biosphere, through the circulation of solar energy. By thinking about the fact that all the plant matter that you are eating, all the animal matter that you are eating, all the flow of wind, of rain, most of the things we depend upon on different time frames, they are activated and they are rendered possible through solar irradiation, and most likely through photosynthesis. So we started to look at those historical examples of bioeconomics, or it takes different names over time, that could help us to look at this sort of permanent solar income reaching the Earth. So Baruch will explain you a very quick sketch that we started to develop just to put our ideas on paper.
Yeah, so it's basically what Nicolas just suggested. This is from really early in our collaboration. So you can see that we have two kinds of forms of energy. Of course, solar energy is a form of nuclear energy. So people who don't like nuclear energy, then you also don't like solar energy. And you can see that all the contemporary input that we get on the Earth is going into from the sun directly. We also have access to some nuclear energy in the Earth, in the materiality of the Earth, which comes to us from the Big Bang, which was stored in the Earth at the Big Bang. That's the only other energy. And then we see how the trajectory goes, how solar energy produces agricultural products and then affords human labor so that we can provide things. We always accompany our exhibitions with diagrams. It's a real part of our practice. It's really a tricky part of our practice. It's difficult to find the ways not to overload the diagrams, so we're always experimenting with new ways to demonstrate this complexity without it becoming too overwhelming.
So obviously we looked at historical examples that could inform and could help to know how to start, what would be the methodology, what would be the logic at play, and so on. So you can start by looking at historical example like Nicolas Georgescu-Roegen that developed this idea of bioeconomics or ecological economics, where again there solar energy is described as the sort of main permanent input that then activates all the ecosystems and later within the ecosystems social dynamics. You can find a little bit, I mean, more abstract, but also maybe more criticized as well, model by Howard T. Odum in the 90s. He calls his model emergy. And emergy is a way to account for sustainability topics and principles, also through solar joules or solar joules equivalent. The idea behind that is to think that a joule in fossil fuel is not equivalent in nature to a joule in plants or a joule directly received from the sun. Those different joules, they have different historical materiality. They have a different track of historical density. So to produce fossil fuel, it's a high historical density of solar energy reaching the Earth's surface. So basically, he came with a methodology to translate different types of matter and energy into solar joules equivalent. And it's already a way to describe our mostly everything around us, processes, matter, energy, through joule equivalent, solar joule equivalent. It's a little bit sketchy.
Yeah. There's amazing tables, so you can see like things like DNA, a strand of DNA, how many solar equivalent joules did it take to produce a strand of DNA over millions of years. So it's calculating in immense time scales. It's quite a fascinating thought experiment model. And it also is accompanied with these great energy flow diagrams.
Yeah, and we added also the donut economics model in the sense that it's more and more used in our spheres and in sustainability spheres as a model that is actually perhaps more applicable to, like current politics and sustainability issues. So Baruch will read a little bit of the statement of the early stage of the project we're talking about now.
Oh yes, okay. So you already saw our 1 square meter of wheat. So we're continuing with that kind of small unit. So we're trying to find units which communicate the stories of energy and accumulation of solar energy and the real ecology and economics of our situation. So the solar share, it's a new kind of unit, which is both energy and currency. It's both energy and money. That's something that has value, and we were talking about value right at the beginning. And it's something that I heard a lot in some of the presentations here so far at ICT4S, this question of value. I think we need to talk about that in more depth and open up those questions. So here we have a materialization of 1 square meter of average solar income on Earth for 1 year. So 1 square meter of solar irradiation. Each solar share is a unit of proof of work of the biosphere. So when we have wheat or plants or anything growing on the land, it's not just the plant itself. Of course, it's all the microorganisms which emerged over millions of years with the plant in the biosphere, which are all working to produce the plants, to produce the things we need, fed by solar energy, right? So that's a proof of work. You know that from the blockchain, right? So we have, it's a store of value, right? That the solar share unit. This edible solar currency, okay, you're going to see we have made some edible money for you. Edible currency represents the simplest economic relation between our cosmic energy source and human metabolic energy requirements. So we try to make it palpable for the visitor to our exhibitions. You know, what are we really talking about, and what are these scales that we're talking about? And so we try to bring it down to what we need to eat for one day. And it just happens to be that the amount of solar radiation in 1 year on 1 square meter of land in normal agriculture grows enough wheat to feed one person for 1 day? 1 day. So you want to go ahead and
sure.
show the next
I can explain the
Yeah.
two scales. So, you know, we don't have the full project to show you, so we will try to bring some provocation and some thoughts. So basically, we will look at these projects from two scales. One scale, which is pretty, you are well aware of, which is sort of the statistical scale. We will look at the planetary photosynthetic potential over a year. So we'll try to get and gather enough data about biomass and photosynthesis potential on land and on the oceans to develop sort of a statistical model of the quantity of new energy, of renewable energy from the sun that the Earth is able to renew in a year. So that's kind of the sort of statistical layer, the sort of planetary layer of the project. And the interesting thing is that at the same time as you describe the quantity of photosynthesis and of energy which is captured, you also describe the quantity of carbon which is sequestrated by this biomass continuously. So one way to look at that that we are kind of jamming or thinking about is to go back to sort of the early Russian cosmism. They thought that spirulina, for instance, was sort of the shortest path between the irradiation of the sun and the production of readily eatable matter. The process is very short, so you can see that even symbolically as a very short path between the energy from the sun that we are unable to process into a matter, a photosynthetic matter that is readily available for humans. So you can produce from that, do you want to add anything? Oh, yeah, you can produce from that different, powder, pills, and so on, that could be understood as basic units of energy, like energy captured in matter. That are sort of a primal level of currency or units, very materialist basic units.
So really talking about the units, we presented this is the first time, and for people who are in the Switzerland, you can still see it for the next 3 weeks at the Langenthal Kunsthal. This is the Solar Share project as it's gotten so far. This is instead of algae or spirulina, we're using wheat again because it associates with our other projects. And here you can see we made these happy cookie-shaped items. They're hardtack. Actually, here again we find an interesting relationship between because they are durable. They don't go bad, right? These and you can eat them for years, right? And it's a military technology, of course. It's over 100 years old, and. Yeah, and you can exchange these, of course, because they don't go bad, so anybody can eat them, and benefit directly from the value that is embodied in these coin units, right? And so each of these represents one square meter of wheat grown under the sun, solar income in a year. And you can see the calculation here: 1 year, 1 square meter. Equals 1 day for one human. Here's the actual other mysterious part, which we had to symbolize, but we couldn't completely describe it, which is where the oven is, when we're cooking the wheat and grinding the wheat flour. We didn't integrate that in the economic model yet.
All right, so that's a quick picture of the harvest day of the farm that we presented in the beginning. So this project, actually, we do it for real, and it's developed over 3 months. These farm projects, so there is actually a harvest at the end, and we weight the output of this experiment, and we readjust the estimation of the price of ecosystem services based on this closed system experiments. It's pretty close to the aquarium world that you mentioned yesterday, or Biosphere 2 that you may know as well, or any space station experiment, basically, where you remote yourself from local environmental conditions. We will open up to a more discursive part of the evening, and do you want to?
Yes,
I would. Now, or?
Okay, well, yeah, we can do that too. Yeah, well, probably we should mention that. But first, I wanted to thank Benoit and Günther for inviting us. We forgot to say that at the beginning. Thank you, Günther and Benoit, also for being fantastic hosts. The food has been amazing, and you have all been amazing. It's been amazing to talk with you. We want to talk now, and now is a chance to also get some of these concepts or troubles or confusion. I hope you all feel safe and secure here, that we can have doubts and be uncertain, and we can discuss, go into some unknown territory together. Just to remind you, on Friday we have a workshop together, and we are using some feedback from our survey. You can contribute to our survey, and we will integrate that into our workshop as a kind of kickoff for our workshop on Friday. So I hope you will contribute to our survey. And just to kick things off, I have a couple of questions from the survey. So yes, I have a couple of questions. So I asked in the survey, the last question of the survey is to ask a yes and no question. So it's an anonymous survey, right? So you can anonymously ask something. So please listen to this question and respond with yes or no. Do we still have a chance to save the planet? Okay. Okay. Very good. That's the one question. And are you ready to struggle? Okay, good. It's very good to know. So we're going to be talking about some of the difficult questions. I mean, these are very troubling questions. That's another thing that Anna Peters, who presented this morning, is so good at engaging with. Such a fantastic and precious vulnerability in opening up the difficulty, actually the emotional difficulty of that we're encountering in with the question of sustainability and how we're moving towards the future. So I hope you all have some interesting things to discuss, or not interesting things. That's also fine. We can discuss some non-interesting. Yes. I think we have some microphones to. Yes, microphone is coming.
Yeah. So basically, that's the question time. So if you have any feedback, ideas, provocations, you're angry about something.
Yes. Complaints. Criticism.
You have ideas or things that came to mind when we presented the project, feel free to discuss them. We have like about half an hour to take those discussions in depth.
Yeah, I just wanted to express my anger. I'm so angry. No. I want to ask you about the question of time, because you mentioned the time scale several times. You mentioned the time scale several times in your presentation, and I felt that there is a contradiction somehow in our urgency, to act, but also the time scales you were referring to related to the geological and maybe cosmic developments. So if we think of it from the perspective of an alien or God or whoever, it's very small timescales, and the Earth will probably recover after all humans have gone extinct. So in some ways it's not that problematic from that point of view, but on the other hand, we don't want to discourage action today, and there seems to be a feeling of, at the same time, we need to do something, but also if the world is going to go to waste, then I'm trying to live my hedonistic lifestyle now because I'm not going to have the time. And I also don't generally think that it's wrong to be focused on the now, here and now, to live a good life now and not think about 7 generations into the future. So I'm wondering how you deal with that different time scales and also questions of values that may not be so clear, talking about the difficult questions. So values of now and then, and do I have to care about the next 7 generations or maybe not?
Yeah. Maybe I have one layer of feedback I can provide. There is something that I kind of found quite fascinating while digging into those topics, is this idea that actually as a society, we have sort of an accelerated metabolism because of all the intense historical energy record we are burning in accelerated speed, right? So if you think about all the coal and fossil fuel that we depend upon for all the good things that we have in current societies, it's in some ways you could see that as an accelerated metabolism, like a metabolism that will be speed up by gobbing up past records of energy in an accelerated manner. So that's maybe one layer that we can look at. And if you look at it through this way, you know, there are many consequences. One is that obviously the repercussion on the environment are connected to that. Like, you know, from the physics class that we take when we are young, we know that any energy produces change in the environment. Any, you know, like use of energy change the environment. So this accelerated metabolism obviously changed the environment even faster. We can also wonder if this speed up metabolism can be something that we can sustain, or that is desirable to sustain that way, or can we afford to sustain it that way? Are we willing to embrace the full artificiality of the Earth as a result of this long-term accelerated metabolism and so on? I know that would be my sort of answer questions at the same time.
Yeah, there's another question coming up, but yeah, I think it's a deep question, and thank you very much for that question. It's not easy to encounter the way that we reproduce our modernity today, and it's not easy to encounter what kind of changes might be necessary. Definitely, there's an artificial drive to produce more industry and to produce more profits, and that's from the business sector, which is driving that. So the only way that we will ever be able to address that side is to address the profit motive, I think. Yeah. Yes. Yes?
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm here. I'm waving.
Oh, hi.
Hello. This is actually a question that when we allowed our students to ask any kind of question to us as teachers, they asked us, how do you cope?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a bit curious about that, because when I've been watching your presentation, I'm thinking that you're staying with the trouble quite a lot. So how do you cope? What kind of things do you do to cope?
Yeah, I think that, you know, one of the parts of the practice that's increasingly important to me is creating situations like this where we can meet and talk and find the language to address our concerns and our worries and to support each other, because it is a pretty lonely and alienating situation that we're in, and the world is changing so quickly, and it's no question, there's no surprise that we're often depressed or alienated by that. So yes, I think we do need to develop a new social and cultural kind of instruments or techniques or rituals which allow us to come together and support each other through the difficulty and allow us to stay with the trouble. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we want to hear all of you.
you comment on
How
this?
do you cope with how do you deal with it?
Okay, so I guess for me there are pretty maybe some crossing lines. I guess like it's kind of a privileged position when you're able to dedicate time to understand, to get a better sense of what's going on, of maybe also get a sense of how it's articulated, what are the main drivers, what are the triggers that could be activated or that are within your reach, the ones that could be activated as a group or from a political level and so on. So once you start to develop sort of a map of what's available, what's to be done, what are the potentialities that are available, you get back to the safer side of the issue, I would say. It doesn't mean that it looks like it's solved, or it looks like it's solvable, or it looks like it's going the right way, but at least it gives a better grasp and a better agency on what's to be done. And to me, I would say that's already enough to remain on the surface level of the water, like a basin or whatever.
For me, there is I think there is hope in staying with the trouble. I mean, there is different ways, and the fact that to acknowledge it, I mean, we can go forward, and it would be more difficult to try to deny it or try to go back or try to separate things. And once we just, I don't know, we just accept it, we can maybe go forward. I don't know.
So.
Haha, it's my turn. Enough KTH. Hi, I'm Gazelle. I'm from the University of Oldenburg, and thank you so much for all of this. I love the projects that you presented, and I also love the fact that you translated, to be honest, fairly indigestible data into art projects, right? Into a multimodal democratic language to some extent. And but I am a researcher and I am not an artist, so I'm used to this narrative arc of problem, potential solution, data, conclusion. So, but throughout the evening, I've been given the problem, the potential, like a methodology, and then you said you did have these kinds of conversations with other people. What kind of feedback did you gather? What kind of information, what do people take away from these installations? What happens to them when they encounter your work? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, I think it's an evolving practice, but again, I think what's really important is to find, I mean, for people who are encountering our work, they're often triggered by one thing or another, or they've been thinking about that, and everybody's thinking about these issues, right? But they're very big issues, and I think what's really important is to provide a kind of safe space or a special space where we can come to terms. And what I mean by come to terms is like develop vocabularies, like develop our own language, each of us developing our own language to address our concerns and address what we're really talking about. Because like the word like sustainability, what does that mean? Everybody has their own understanding of it, really. And if we're gonna try to support each other, do something about it together, I don't know, we need to understand each other's interpretation of the situation. And so that's what they get. I mean, I don't know what they get out of it, what they would say, because I'm not them, but what we can observe and what I can observe is that we have conversations and we develop ways to produce spaces. We instrumentalize institutions like the arts institution or the science museum to provide a space for these kind of ritual practices or coming together practices whereby we can learn how to talk about these things and engage and join together.
I guess as well that we, we presented earlier, we try to render quite undigestible set of data and complex theoretical issues, sometimes new paradigm or new, theoretical framing to address current topics into something experienceable, something more down to earth, something more concrete or physical. And often we realize that people are quite thankful for this type of experience, or for getting a better sense or better idea of scales, or idea of hidden drivers, or how things are connected together. Because we talk a lot, the media is covering these kind of topics all the time, but it's almost deliberately vague. It's never getting very political, it's never getting very materialist. You're never given all the information and the means to get a full understanding of all those issues are connected together, and how you can address them, how you can not only do the little tweak to your lifestyle daily, but address those issues on a systemic level. And just providing those means and to help to grasp with that, I think it's often something that people seem to take away from the show.
Okay, so I'm Daniel from KTH in Stockholm. And I guess there are two stories here, and you told us one story about ecological limits and energy limits and material limits and pollution and time and many different kinds of limits. But you are at a computing conference, or two of them perhaps, actually. And there's another story about the Internet of Things and AI and big data and machine learning and ChatGPT and ubiquitous computing power and processors everywhere, et cetera, et cetera. The sky is the limit. And so since you're here, I guess you can say that these two stories, they're also two contradictory trends that must at some point come in contact or conflict with each other. So contradictory trend sounds very sanitized, but you might say that there must be they're on a collision course eventually, because only one of these stories or trends can sort of be the major one that win. And it's pretty clear that one of them is a super tanker that takes a day or a week to turn around, and the other is a Tesla. So how do you see this play out, or I'm asking you to project a bit into the future, because you've been thinking a lot about this. And again, you're at a computing conference, perhaps you have some thing you want us to think about, or tell us how we should think about this.
Well, you're already thinking a lot about it, I think. I mean, if we can support your work, we're happy. If we can help you also overcome disciplinary boundaries, I think that's one thing that art can do, to help provide a pretext for different scientists or technicians or engineers or knowledgeable people or people from the public also to meet together in ways that they're not used to and share their knowledge and experience in a helpful way. But yeah, I think that, well, of course, who knows what kind of energy, ways that we're going to be able to generate energy are going to emerge in the future. So there may not be that much of a dire energy problem with regard to computation, but I think it will come down to what are we computing for? Like, what are we using all of our ingenuity for? Like, what are we using all of our time for? Right? What are the priorities that have been set for us to dedicate our imaginations, our genius, and our machines? I mean, I think we can be more demanding about that, but then again, institutionally, we are limited. There's government priorities for funding, and those have to, I think we need to address those, learn to address those more directly as specialists. Like, how do we make a different kind of science program on a national level, for example, so that different kinds of research take place? Because nowadays research is largely conformed by the business sector. What is going to produce productivity or growth, right? Maybe we want to develop other lines of research and have more investment in them.
Yeah, I could add maybe two anecdotes or angles to that. So often I see the domain or the field of ICT as a mean of fluidification of human actions or human activities. So basically, you know, it fluidifies the speed and the quantity of communication, but also of energy and matter circulation around the globe. So, you know, by design, almost, it's a mean that accelerates the agitation of the world, right? So there is something intrinsic within ICT that move towards an acceleration and intensification of matter and energy around the globe. But at the same time, to maybe complete a little bit on what Baruch just said, we could also think about, I mean, then you have to go to the planification side of things, right? If it's not just private company in competition that are just running for profit and so on, then you have to think differently. You have to think in the sense of planification. Where do we want as a society to allocate the labor potential, the computing potential? Where do we want to put to use those new functions, those new capacities? And there are a lot of ways we can answer to that. And maybe they are not in developing better advertising systems, better tracking systems, better crypto, inflationary, whatever bubble. There are many ways in which we could think about how do we allocate the innovations and the better computing power.
I have the mic here. I have the token, so to say. I have a short. Oh, should I? Okay, I prefer without the mic. A short compliment, a moment of gratitude, and a question. Compliment is I've seldomly seen such a holistic and yet deep understanding as you presented throughout all your projects. So thanks for that, even among scientists, and so thanks. The gratitude is that you mentioned Georgescu Rögen. I love the guy. I present myself as Vlad TU Berlin, but from next month I would present myself Vlad at Rögen Center for Sustainability, because I gave his name to my company. I'm not sure I'm allowed, but I also didn't know whom to ask, so I just did it. And the question is the following. A topic here at the conference, and actually throughout the last years, is sustainability education for computing. And I was wondering while looking at your things, were you ever like formally involved in a university education or even pre-university education project? And could you tell us a bit about it? And if not, would you have any input how we might use some of your, do you have any input for us on this level? Also over the next days, if something comes to mind.
Yeah, well, we definitely think about that application of our work when we're producing it, and also like the visuals, as you can tell, that we like Maria and is very successful at producing very, very attractive visuals that are simple and gripping, right? And we want people to share them. We want people to use them in their communication and help when they're teaching each other or informing each other about complex issues, you know, that they pull out these images or pull out our work. So we try to make them available on, like, in readily available forms that people can use in their normal everyday education. Because I think what we were talking about, like with Anna this morning, right? Anna Peters was, we had some interesting questions at the end, like, are these emotional questions like orthogonal to engineering questions or science questions, you know? Do they belong in science education? Do they belong in engineering education? And I feel that very, it's a very difficult question to resolve, because actually science doesn't have any place for ethics, or, I mean, scientific progress doesn't have any place for ethics as such. When you go into the lab, you put your beliefs and your ethics aside, and you do the problem, you know, try to solve the problem. I think that we need to I mean, we need to acknowledge to a certain extent that's what's happening in engineering, and that's what Anna Peters was saying at the end. You know, like maybe engineering doesn't belong in the university, you know, because university is a place for questioning. But yeah, it's a very difficult question. We need to. I personally teach, so I try to use these examples to help demystify complex problems and generate conversations. But and that's what we mostly try to do, and we try to afford scientists and technicians media objects which they can use to communicate and start discussions among themselves. So please use them in your educational efforts.
Hi.
Yeah.
Here. I'm Shoaib from KTH, Stockholm. I really enjoyed a lot, and all of us enjoyed your work a lot. And I think there is need for many more artists like you who provide innovative, high-quality artistic works to bridge the discrepancy between the scientific community and the general public. So what should be done to more people like you, artists, have their focus on these issues and climate change?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and actually we've been sincerely thinking about that a lot, and not only as the position of artist, but as a missing position within the academia. Because, you know, at the early stage of this project, when we were visiting labs and interviewing people and so on, first of all, we realized that some people don't even know about the work of their very close relatives in another discipline or in a very, you know, like aligned field of research. Those content don't really flow within the tiny boundaries of academia. So that's already a very frustrating thing. Then we heard from many scientists that it's frustrating because the output of their research don't really circulate in society. You know, like it remains in a sort of echo chamber of the discussion within the range of that particular field of expertise. So that was the second complaint. And then we also realized that some of the outcomes, some of the models, some of the new concepts are made to be adjacent or organized together to meet. And there is no much space in society for those things to meet. So it's just by, you know, like by default, by a lack of other options that we end up playing with those things and creating a space for them to meet. But I think that we should wait and expect other place in society so that those things can meet and circulate, and also feedback again to the scientific community and create better, more nuanced, more complex sets of discussions and sets of concerns, because obviously they are very high-level notions, concepts, models, but also you know, like understandings of the issues. We have a pretty good understanding of the different issues we are confronted with. We don't really lack so much quality data and quality understanding of what's coming and what's happening. Most likely what we lack is the sort of transversal, you know, arrangement of those blocks, and also the ability to implement that on a higher scale, like on the political level, on the infrastructural level. And while working on those topics, that was the biggest frustration for us, is to understand that we don't like, in most domains, we don't really like research, or we don't really like data anymore. We lack the ability and the possibility and the agency to activate those things, you know, on another layer, which is not anymore the layer of the knowledge, it's the layer of being able and authorized and able to organize ourselves so that those things can be implemented, basically. And then it's a very political layer, I would say.
It's the political dimension. And as just a plug for our workshop again on Friday, we're going to be sharing some of our artistic techniques with you to see how they apply to some of the struggles that you are grappling with. And so I hope you do come and we can show you and we can experiment and rapidly prototype some kind of artistic approaches to the problems that you are struggling with.
Hi, I'm Maël here from Toulouse University, and so I will join the others and say that I also very loved your work, and I was blown away by it. And then I thought about it, and I realized that you were only communicating about the issues, and I wonder if you also thought about communicating about potential solutions, and if you had ideas on that as well with this kind of artwork.
Well, on what level are you looking for a solution, like a technical solution or a political solution, or?
Well, I mean, whichever. But I think there are some. You say that we have a lot of data about the issues. I agree with that. We also have a lot of data, a lot of proposals of solutions and new imaginaries. And I was wondering if you also thought about trying to, illustrate them.
Yeah, I think the basic problem or the basic thing we need a solution for is to have more time to stay with these problems and to develop techniques to address these problems with our expertise and with our knowledge. And so we need to find, that's the solution I think we need to find, is to to allow ourselves to have more time and resources to address these problems.
But indeed, there is a lot of interesting communities and experiment and small-scale practices that can be very good lead or examples. I guess that can lead to a next phase in the project and the research we are doing. The main question we are confronted with is all those the privilege of or the sometimes it can be a matter of privilege to be able to develop those alternative practices. It can be also a matter of courage, but it's sometimes hard to see how all those things can be translated to a larger framework, right? So I will say that that's maybe the main place of inquiry. It's not so much the fact that it exists, that we can do differently at a scale of 10 people, 100 people, or scale of people that are well educated and that have high enough income so that they can choose between one way of consuming or another, or one way of transport or another. Maybe the reason we didn't include that so far is because we try to look at those issues from a kind of a systemic and a large-scale expectation, and it's sometimes tough to see how you can transpose these kind of alternative practices to a more commonly shared framework.
Yeah, I mean, when I was thinking about it, it could be just, for example, showing that you have to use, I don't remember the number, but like 400 liters of water for 1 square meter of wheat, and then if you put it in nature, then it's already provided, and you represent also this data and show that, well, we kind of not saying, but we kind of have the solution. It's it's also, well, I don't know. Those kind of ideas, but thanks.
Hello, hello. I'm Laurent from Minoria in Lyon. I have another kind of question. I have the feeling, maybe I'm wrong, that your provocative art relies a lot on usage of ICT. I see graphical design, GPU, simulations, maybe. Is it mandatory for you to use this ICT, or do you explore some frugality, low-tech, artistic movement, things like that, for expressing the same kind of message?
Yes, so I think we're a little bit toying with those two edge of the spectrum. So indeed, in the material that we can share on this kind of video screen, there are some captures of exhibitions and those 3D materials that we kind of played with as a way to represent abstract ideas or sort of caricatural extreme ideas that can't really be given shape to. But on the other hand, we also, present those concepts through workshops, through the paper-based games, or home-printed projects and games and workshop methods.
Our website is pretty low-tech.
That's true. And yeah, I guess we could go further with that, obviously. But we also, I guess, embrace the type of infrastructure that is available in Given, and the one that we coexist with in a way. But we could, yeah, that could totally be a potential to caricaturize or to explore a deeper end of frugality in the usage of techniques.
But we're very open to people who are developing low-tech ways of doing things, and we would love to collaborate with these things. I mean, personally, I'm against responsibilization, which is the notion that everybody has to take personal responsibility for huge environmental systemic problems. And so I think we need to understand that any kind of way to address these problems has to be systemic and also on a social and political level, not on the personal level.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Gauthier. I have a question for Maria. Because I understand that you are producing most of the aesthetics of the projects here. And I was wondering what are the choices, what are the inspiration that you are taking, that you are taking in to produce the overall aesthetics that we see through all these art projects?
Thank you for the question. I'm not the only one. I mean, we are working in a team, so we are obviously producing everything together. But usually I'm trying to use the ready-mades I find. For example, for bestiary, like it was a clear inspiration of already existing boards like biodiversity illustrations. Actually we are trying to use the aesthetic already existing and just reappropriate things, and to not add like new aesthetics, but rather use something you can see in the projects. That's often like for the videos, 3D videos, for example, it was inspired by educational videos like from the 80s, like very simple ones. So this is like the inspirations found like already like ready-mades, which are just transformed.
Hey, I'm Etienne from INRIA. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was great. It worked really well on me. ECOG anxiety level increased so much. So thanks. You worked a lot on things that were unwishable for people, and I think there is a big need also to change the imaginaries of people, what is wishable in society. Do you think it's also possible to work on that with art, or have you thought about this?
Sure. I mean, we are aware that some of the first topics we tackled with this post-growth series kind of put the finger on the materiality of our lifestyle, and by design it can be a bit dark, or a bit at least a heavy weight of consequence. But some of the new research we're doing, like the one with the solar share, yeah, to me it has some sort of hopeful, reality check inside that, in the sense that it brings you back with the physical flow of what's renewed on Earth. And if we really want to embrace the ideas of renewable and sustainability, what does comes with it? What are the order of magnitudes and the consequences and the physicality of this kind of imaginaries and objectives? I think those are types of new steps of project that can be embraced in a sort of very challenging sort of confrontation, but also things that bring some the light of knowledge and understanding. Huh?
I think one of the things that we want, I mean, we're very conscious of it in our presentation, is that we need to, I think nobody will follow a political line that is pessimistic, right? Or at least like not a lot of people. Okay, there are people like, you know, melancholic people who will want to follow a pessimistic line as a kind of aesthetic statement, but basically people want prospects, hopeful prospects for their children, for their grandchildren. They want to, and especially when we're thinking politically, right? You'll never have a party saying, okay, well, we're growing too much. We have to live a little more frugally. Maybe we have to help the global South more, and we have to sacrifice here. They'll never get any votes. I mean, even though it's ethically maybe correct, they won't get any votes, right? And people won't join this movement. So we need to, not in a naive way, bring hope, but in a grounded way. So like, for example, talking about energy, what is energy really? How does energy factor into how we live today, and how can we live better with, you know, in addressing the way that we generate energy today, and finding other ways to provide that energy, and really understand what the challenge is. That can be hopeful and critical at the same time, and hopefully people can join a movement to do it, right? Because they have the good prospects.
Okay, thanks.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Oh, we have lots of questions here now. Everybody's. Yeah.
I'll try to make quick. Simon from ENS Lyon.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for the work. It's really great, and I think I joined the other people in the room saying that I really enjoyed it. I think most of us are already convinced, and I wanted to know if sometimes you get feedback that are a little bit more virulent, I would say, and people that are not really convinced by the fact that we are going in the wrong direction. And yeah, do you see, like, did you already see a change of mentality in those people when presenting your work?
Yeah, so obviously you're a pretty engineered, compatible, engineering compatible crowd. So, you know, like the quantifying things or talking about the limits of quantifications is something that can be addressed pretty easily with a crowd like that. Huh? So obviously sometimes it's I would say, like, even among radical left, it's seen as something very touchy to play with numbers. You know, like quantifying, putting numbers on things. It's very problematic. It's perceived as very problematic. So sometimes it's even in this kind of privilege and very close to our earth crowds that the tension and the acceptability can be the most challenging, because using the tools of the oppressor, using the tools of the issue to address those issues is often seen as a unacceptable process. And putting a number on, you know, even if we are very careful about saying, okay, we give an order of magnitude, we give a sense of scale of ecosystem services, for instance, is seen as something, a sacrilege, and not something you should not even mention or try to do. So this is an example of a space where those discussions can be more tricky than they could appear at first. And no later than a week ago, we had another kind of tricky experience where we were in a large conference on carbon dioxide removal. carbon sequestration. And actually, the type of scientific crowd there had very different ways to relate to sustainability and to climate change. Because the level of, I mean, mainly in the industrial side of carbon sequestration, the level of complexity and the level of challenge is very high. And you end up meeting and exchanging with scientists and with engineers that are, their mental space is totally full with the complexity of the challenge they are trying to achieve. And they don't really have space to reflect back on what they are doing, to think and discuss critically about what's going on and what are the implications, what are the different potential, the desirability, at what scale, in what conditions, and so on. There is not much space for that, and it's even seen as something, like out of scope or problematic to get on those lines. So it's just another example of where the type of project and the type of reflection we try to bring can be sort of uncomfortable or even unwanted,
Hey, thanks for the presentation. I'm Aina Rassolier from INRIA in Grenoble. So I want a short answer. I am the last question, I think. Given what you've seen during this day, you as artists, what is the most important message you have to say to us as researchers going to ICT4S? So,
I mean, maybe we have multiple messages, right? But I mean, my message will be to develop your track of research and interest in ICT for the benefits of the good actors, to well identify what are the actors you want to provide benefits to. Because most of the time in the ICT sector, where the benefits ends up, I don't talk about economic benefits only, but where the privilege, the acceleration, the optimization, the work labor, the work potential is distributed. Is not towards the social benefits, not towards like developing better ability to think, to act, to live together, to connect, and so on. But obviously in other spectrum of the ICT that are, I think, quite toxic.
I mean, thanks for the question, and it's a privilege to even respond. I would definitely encourage you, maybe I'm repeating myself, but really encourage you to trust your instincts about what you are concerned about, and give space to it, and find people you can speak to, and find associates. I mean, we have a conference, Computing Within Limits, next week. So you can also join that conference online, right, Daniel? And Alina, yeah, Alina is chairing this conference, and you saw Alina as such a great chair too. So it's going to be, even though a very difficult topic, and we're going to be delving into really the limits of computation. It's a very welcoming community, as you see. I mean, we are trying to support each other here, and that's what I know. So this is our second ITC for us, and I think you should all applaud yourselves for being so welcoming to each other with these difficult and challenging questions, right? So maybe. And the only other thing I would say is think about what ICT really is. What are the machines? What are they doing? What are they? What can they do? What are they for? How do they work? How are they powered? Just think deeply about the machine itself. That's what I always start with my students when we start to address the deeper problems. What is this machine exactly?
Putting the why in the how, or instead of the how. Yeah, okay. We need to wrap up, I think.
Yeah, it's very warm, but thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.